Barbarian Horde, I am your main man, and today we're going to talk about druids from Dungeons & Dragons. You've been asking for this video for a long time, and today your main man will break his silence on the topic that is on your mind. I've done an enormous amount of videos in these series. Just type in wood, WW80, that's what would Ander do, and then type in like fighter, type in druid, type in bard, type in thief or rogue, I don't know what I did there, paladin, anti-paladin. There's an enormous amount of them. If you want to hear my thoughts on these different classes, on wizards, on how I do wizards, on non-Vancian magic, there's an enormous amount of it out there. Also check out Raw Immersive Games, like the page on Facebook, get all the latest updates on Within the Ring of Fire. You can have a look. We got more flames than you can handle. The game is going to be out very soon. Be videos here, be information on Raw Immersive Games on Facebook, and you make sure you understand. You will get it. I will not be shy in the pimping and pandering of my product. Speaking of that, you can check out the link right here. See my Cafe Press store. You can get your hats and shirts. You can get your maps of Kavega-Thale, the world that Within the Ring of Fire takes place in. A ton of merchandise already available. The game line will be out very soon. Hardback books, we have some softback books. Going to have PDF copies that you'll be able to get a hold of as well. But right now we want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons. Hell, I got a Dungeons & Dragons hat on, courtesy of Black Bar. Check his channel out. Now, druids, we're going to start with them right here in 3.5, and we're going to go all over the place. So let me read this, which begins to describe a good entry point that they have in the book here for explaining what in their mind a druid is. The fury of a storm, the gentle strength of the morning sun, the cunning of the fox, the power of the bear, all these things and more are at the druid's command. And that's evocative. You're thinking of the natural aspects, the sun, the animals, the thunder. And those are really ancient institutions in the creation of religion. Thunder, the storm, and the sun. People looked up and they saw the sun. They say, that is God. They heard the thunder, and they knew that was God's voice. And that is so quintessentially part of the human experience. That's a wonderful thing to bring in. Not really a druid, though. The Dungeons & Dragons archetype design of a druid isn't very similar at all to the British Isles druid, the Merlin the Magician. The druid class, really, it's probably, historically speaking, more like a witch than anything else. Although you have this weird arcane magic, these wizards in D&D that, again, quite frankly, don't make much sense because magic itself it's pretty much divine. But we've talked about that before. So, witches, historically, this is more of what a witch is. Maybe a witch, shaman, way over here a druid in terms of historically looking at a base formation of the class. The druid, if you were going to make Merlin a magician, you probably wouldn't make him a druid because yet. Druids weren't these weirdos that lived alone with animals out in the woods. That's a witch. That's a witch. That's not a shaman either. Shaman's with the tribe. A druid was a leader, respected man of the tribe. He was a diplomat, and he was a diviner. Druids, I don't even think in this edition have divination. And that was their magic, was divination. Because that's so important, being in tune with things like the seasons, because they wanted to have an agricultural agrarian communities, and that is an extraordinarily important aspect to these communities. So that's something that you have to think about with the druid. You think about the divination, the leadership qualities, and in D&D, those are sort of qualities that I took in amongst with a lot of other from real world research when I constructed a druidic grouping of advantages for Within the Ring of Fire, bringing that out and having more of an authentic British Isles bit of flavor to that concept, and then interjecting into the fantasy world and building there. This is really more of a witch. This, to be quite honest, to be quite frank, they shape shift. They're sort of weird. They're alone. They're out with animals. They do those things that, quite honestly, if you broke the powers down, forgot the name Druid, and you looked at it in a movie, you'd go, "Oh, that's a witch, isn't it?" Particularly if the character happened to be female, you wouldn't go, "Oh, that's a druid." It'd be a witch. They got this animal running around with them that, quite honestly, what's the difference really visually between that and a familiar? All right, you have the idea of the shape shifting, the elemental aspect of the worship of nature. So it's has a very strong sort of witchcraft feel to it. All that's not to say that the class itself doesn't have merit, doesn't have value, can't be used, can't be fun. A lot of people love the druids. There's some different types that people seem to play now. One is a very combat-oriented character. It's I take this feat and this spell and this and this and this, and I change this class feature to that class feature. Now I just turn into a bear and kill people, or worse yet, a dinosaur. I don't know. To me, obviously, when you're always trying to get the power game on, I find that embarrassing, to be quite frank. But the base root of that concept is fine. It's like, well, I turn into a wolf and fight people. All right, whatever. I turn into a bear and fight people. Okay. I mean, I don't see anything particularly problematic with that. It's just, once it seems to be a concept that's done over and over, done to death in that third edition line, in the Pathfinder line, because it's a very breakable concept where, and you guys get what I'm saying. That once something becomes done to death, you don't want to see it anymore. You're like, okay, I'm done with that. Please, something have a different take, do something fresh, do something interesting with that. The character class also has a scimitar, which I've never understood that. People go, oh, it's the sickle curve. Like, well, how about a sickle? How about just a sickle, right? The scimitar is an Arabian weapon. It doesn't have any. The people in cultures that had druids have never even seen the weapon. It's been with the class since AD&D First Edition. I have no idea why. I've never understood that. I thought it was very weird because for some reason they're so close to the earth, right, that they can't wear metal armor. Yet they seem to all use scimitars. All of them. Like 90% of druids I've ever seen played, and not necessarily to say in games I'm in, but you look at a table and you see people playing or you hear them talking and you're like, oh, another druid with a scimitar. So the scimitar, if they're not like just turning into a bear and fighting, it's a scimitar. Yet, again, they have to use like wooden shields. They can't even use a metal shield, I don't think. So you can't use a metal shield for no apparent reason, right? I mean, the excuse here doesn't make sense when you're running around with a big thing on metal here. What's the difference between a metal shield and a metal scimitar? I could see, okay, we got to have a flint-tipped spear or a bone club or quarter staff or, we could go on and on with different sorts of weapons, flint-tipped arrows, things like that for druids. But I think that the weapon selection there it compromises the concept they're trying to make of this sort of eco-terrorist Nazi, something that's vaguely feels like it's from War of the Apocalypse. So overall, I do find that problematic. I don't like that. I don't see why they need to be wearing animal skins and carrying a wooden shield, but also they could have a big giant piece of metal right here that they're carrying around with them. It's a little questionable. I could even see it better explained away for like, oh, they have to use silver weapons. If they use metal at all, you should go with silver. If you start getting into more like that, all of a sudden, the things start clicking. It's a mechanical choice. It's to slot things out mechanically as opposed to take it conceptually and develop mechanics conceptually. It's reverse. It's the reverse of the way I would design something, of the way I do design things, the way I think things should be designed. You start with the real feel concept from looking in the eyes out, instead of looking at the concepts where we're going to slot things and going backwards. Hopefully that made sense. If it didn't, I guess it didn't. But they're fairly decent warriors. They have very strong saving throws, and I think all the additions in this, they become very resistant to different kinds of poisons, which is a great thing to have, particularly if it all depends on what kind of game you're in, really, as to what negative effects are available there. Disease is a big deal. Well, if you have immunities or resistance to disease, it means something. If it isn't, then it doesn't really mean anything. Same thing with poison here. But they can change into elemental forms. They can change into animals, to snakes or birds or bears or wolves or probably dinosaurs. If somehow they've come in contact with them. You do have dinosaurs in some D&D games. I know they have them in Schult in the Forgotten Realms setting. If they don't, then they don't. Another thing that's a very big problematic, it goes real world animals. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So rip that out of your mind right away. In your fantasy world, there should probably be at least 50 new kinds of animals and loads of things that aren't there. You're like, well, sorry, in this fantasy setting, there are no killer whales. Well, I would turn a killer whale. They're not an animal here. Can't do it, buddy. Now, but the way I like to do druids is like this. You have to study the animal. You don't just go, well, I'm a druid from this great desert. I'm going to turn to a squirrel now. How are you going to turn a squirrel? Do you never seen a squirrel? How you never barely seen a tree? How are you going to turn into a squirrel? Oh, what's going to do it? It's an animal. No, you're not. So for me, you have to sit there and study for hours on end that animal and then make a roll. You see, and then you could take a skill like animal handling or something that isn't really used all that much and add more value to it. Say, okay, you gotta spend an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours, 5 hours, 8 hours, whatever you want to do. Have them make that roll, and if they do well with it, then they can learn. Maybe you say like a DC 15 and say, okay, hit. But if you hit that natural one, for me, you can never learn how to be that animal. Like it's not going to happen. Or if you want to be more forgiving and say, okay, you could try again, but not until next level, or maybe not until 2 levels from now. Sort of penalize it to make it more entertaining. Trust me, players actually like that stuff because it makes all of a sudden it makes their abilities awesome. They're like, well, I had to study and learn the armadillo, and the druid might even go, oh, well, we have to go over here because in this forest these kind of animals are. Oh, they have brown bears up there. I want to learn how to become a brown bear. I want to study them. I want to go over to this area because they have elephants. I'm gonna turn into an elephant. And when you're doing that, you don't have to all of a sudden go, okay, we can only turn into a large, not a huge elephant too big. You've made them work for it. Let them have it. There's a Tyrannosaurus Rex in your cholt and they study it. Let them have it. If you have bizarre, odd animals in your world, they turn into animals, not real world animals. Those animals are real in their world, and that's all that matters, right? That's a complete immersion break. It's like, well, I could turn into a fox, but the Trumbulan, which is a kind of big lizard they have, which is an animal, I can't turn into that. Of course they can. Let them turn into giant spiders. Let them turn into giant lizards. See, because now you're giving them a payback. You're giving them more, but you're making them study it. Good luck studying that giant spider for 5 hours. That is going to be a wonderful thing, a wonderful test. You're trying to use your druidic mind powers on it. You carve together a great scene, and it can be boom, 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 nice cinematic style. You can run it montage and really give the character, let them interact with you. You should begin to weave narratives collectively. You're bringing the player out of the shell. You're bringing the player into the action and the excitement. It's wonderful. And remember, they had to learn these. As soon as they got that wild shape, right, at 5th level or 7th level, I think in AD&D, you are making them work for it, making them earn it. So it balances. It works perfectly fine. I've done that for a long time with druids. The players like it because it gives them more spotlight, gives them more something to do. Instead of sitting there like, what am I doing here? You're like, ooh, let me go grab this slug and learn about how to turn into a slug. Right? You're like, oh, slug, why'd you want to do that? Oh, well, then you think about how little a slug is, how it could just ease into places. And a slug is a wonderful form to have. And you make the player engage that mindset, engage that animalistic mindset, turn into that animal. Like, now I'm turned into a slug. Now turn into a centipede. Now turn into a giant spider or a velociraptor. And you're seeing it through their eyes. And you're giving the player this wonderful experience, a true, authentic learning experience of that type of animal, which is what they probably wanted to begin with, as this druid shapeshifter kind of thing. I would strongly recommend trying it out. If you haven't done it, and again, remember we're talking another penalty, right? So you can maybe you can learn to be a dinosaur, but you roll that one is off the table, and I run it just like that. And then they have a list right here when their character sheet forms, band forms, and they write them down. Your druid might be 8th level and have like 7 things it can turn into, but he might be out there just boom, boom, boom every time he can. I'm gonna learn how to turn into a cricket. I'm gonna learn how to turn into a swallow. I'm gonna learn how to turn into this and that. And it might be that one form that saves your life. You're like, well, I turned into a cricket and hopped away into the grass. You're like, oh, okay. So you had to give it to them because they instead of going, oh, cricket, what value does that have? They saw the opportunity to value, and then you can engage things. Now you have that desire, like you're eating things like a cricket. You understand? You're eating things like a bullfrog. You're eating things like a velociraptor, and there's smells of senses, that hearing. Engage all that when someone turns an animal to go, oh, turn an animal. No. Talk about how they smell things, how they taste the air with their tongue, how they hear, how sonar works if they're a bat. Explain all those things, to go through the rich luxury of detail, because that's what the players are asking for when they're telling you this. They want the experience of being a wolf, not the statistical bonuses. And if you give them a rich drink of that experience, oh, they're going to love what they're doing here. They're going to have a wonderful time playing that druid. If it's just, okay, you have a D4 plus 1 bite or whatever nonsense it is, they're like, well, okay, I mean, I got my bite on and I got my power game on. And they're sitting there distracted and uninterested instead of being like, oh, it's a dragonfly. You just described a dragonfly, right? Well, yeah, it was a dragonfly, yeah. Oh, I run after it, I chase it, I catch it. Maybe they use like a low-level like stun spell, and every days a dragonfly comes down and they capture it. Or however their interface, their interaction, their spell use is, you really can add to it. You can add some wonderful details, of this druidic shamanic witchcraft style of weirdness that's bundled together with metal weapons for no apparent reason and animal companions. So the class itself certainly has a popularity with certain sorts of players. I find female players really like the Druid. The only character I've ever had that went to 20th level or above, Jarthlin Flynn, High Elf, which is a Silver Elf, Forgotten Realms. He got up to 21st level as a Druid. Only time I've ever done that. Never had a character even close to the high level as he was. So I understand a thing or two about the Druid, the hero font Druid. And if you haven't looked at AD&D second edition, you might want to bring some of that idea in there. You know, the druids fighting for position and advancing upward and so forth, you know, and these weird things that you can encounter. It's like, okay, well, you're like an evil-ass Knoll druid, but I still respect you because you're a druid. We can still speak druidic cant to each other. Oh, look at that. That's a tree folk druid. Over there, that druid's a troll. And you have this weird commonality with this druid of chaos or law or of neutral good or of true neutral or neutral evil. Because now you have a footing. You know, how does the druid of a tribe of gnolls or tribe of goblins react to you? Because all of a sudden there's a bond, there's a commonality. So as a game master, don't throw that away. Take those tools and use them to build an interesting story. Because, you know, they might be about to like lop the goblin druid's head off and go like, no. And, you know, you prevent them from doing that because you have a bond there, a shared bond of religious tradition. And that could be an incredibly interesting role-playing aspect to add into your character. And that's what you need to look for, those little bits where you can add, and that's what tells a great, wonderful story. Let your main man know in the comments down below what you think about the Druid class